Thank you for being here as a guest of the Tong Tong Fair. You're going to talk about your work, and especially the Sluimerend Vuur exposition, which is in a special tent here. Is this the first time your work is on show in a tent?
Yes, it's the first time to be in a tent like this. Well, the previous tents were very small, to be honest. So this is the biggest tent I've ever been.
So last year, your work was shown in the I Film Museum in Amsterdam, which is a totally different environment, of course, but we'll come back to that. I don't know whether you've seen the exposition yet. If you didn't, you should, because it's beautiful. And it was just a short time while in the I Museum, so this is your chance to see it. It consists of 10 huge screens telling a story and having an own soundscape. It shows home videos of the Indies. The films tell a story, a narrative, but not in a regular way. It's a sort of cinematic stream of consciousness. And if you walk through the tent in half dark, then it's as if you pass sorts of memories, dreams. So it's beautiful. Well, reviewers have raged about your exposition. They think it's not only beautiful, but captivating, hypnotizing. But of course, there are questions to ask. But let me first introduce you a little to the public. Peter is born in Hungary in 1950. He has made more than 30 films, I think, for which he has received many international awards. Private Photo and Film Foundation in Hungary, with footage, so home videos from Hungary. And from this footage, you made many films about the history of Hungary. But you also used footage from other European countries to represent European history. And you focused especially on of course, the big trauma of the 20th century in Europe, World War II and the Holocaust. You use specifically, and maybe I should say exclusively, home videos for your work. So these are films, short films, you know. People, you would know what home videos are. Short films, homemade, people made by amateur filmmakers to make a sort of visual record of family activities, outings, birthdays, drinking tea in the garden. So these films are especially made to be viewed in a family circle, so for private use. But you used these films and shifted them to a public domain. So my first question is, why do you exclusively focus on home videos?
In the 20th century, when amateur filmmaking was invented, or allowed or made possible by the technology, people started to make photographs with the Kodak box camera in the late 19th century. And it's very interesting that the Kodak box camera, invented by George Eastman in 1894, that market opened up a different attitude of photography. For example, in the first photographies, or the first 70 years of photography, we don't see too much smile on the pictures. Smiles were not really nice or accepted, and not even in paintings. So the first smile in art history was boo rude out because of seeing a teeth was not a nice thing. But having a private person photographing in his own environment, smile became also a gesture not to the camera, but to the person behind the camera. And the amateur film took this very interesting feature also, that private film, private footage, home movies, and not home videos, because home videos started in the 70s with VHS cameras, were created to memorize, as we all of us do, having family photo albums, etc. Suddenly the environment, the style, lifestyle, private events became notoriously recorded. Of course, running an archive of home movies in Hungary, I've seen at least 500 weddings recorded, but I haven't seen any divorces. Which doesn't mean that divorce never happened in history, but of history of humankind, but the recording is something else. And having this question of the private choice of home movies is also embedded in the twists of Hungarian history. And I was born in 1950, and that was right in the bloodiest seasons of communist dictatorship, Soviet dictatorship, which meant that history, good part of history, was suppressed, and it was forbidden, in a way, to recall the mid-war period, which was not a happy period, but many people had their cameras, and the whole lifestyle of the middle classes or the upper classes who could afford cameras. And this relates also to this exhibition right here and the collection of home movies made in the Dutch East Indies. They keep, they record, they store, they do something with those private moments and events. And though everybody is aiming to record happy moments, but we know that human life, as I said, just with this little illusion, metaphor of the number of recorded marriage and the number of recorded, non-recorded divorce, shows that we are trying to keep for eternal usage the happy moments. But life is much more complex. So going to these families that we chose for source materials for this exhibition, I can say that that's the most exciting part. Life is so complex, and I never saw a history black and white like that. And in the light of Suharto's and Sukarno's bloody events, even we know that we have to speak differently about colonial times than before.
Yes, differently. But you yourself mentioned that home videos record the happy moments. There's no failures, no divorce, no sadness in these films. So how could that be the base for your film to make a different, or to look differently at histories?
Well, I have to mention two persons. I'm lucky to have them here. Cesar Messemaker, my producer and filmmaker friend, with whom we are working together since 21 years, and Evelyn Buchholz, who is a researcher, and she is expert on the letters written from the Dutch East Indies to the families in Holland, which means that we have these two brilliant persons here in the first row. Please show yourself to the public, because I'm not working alone. I'm sitting here putting together the whole thing, but without these brilliant and clever and talented persons, this contrast between the real life, what we say, what we live through, and the happy moments, this which is not a contradiction but a contrast, this is how these narratives are built up. For example, there is this brilliant story that is the first when you enter this. It's the story of the Tan family, and I'm happy to have here the lady who is as a baby on the film, and this is how the memory works. The memory is not full of happy moments, though we like to think of the past selectively like that. But if we're honest to ourselves, or if we read brilliant books about those periods, or the Kousbroek, or we have a lot of you Dutch and Indo people have these brilliant authors. We know that life is so complex, and having these beautiful films, I'm using beautiful in the meaning that's so varied, so complex, so many things that you even smell the things together. And from these letters, all those problems that the newcomers or people living there, Dutch people or mixed population, people, individuals, had their experience, life experience. These gives a very, very rich, grand epic that you find here in this exposition. And the point is how we layer these things and not define them. I'm not a judge. I'm not a historian. I'm an artist with historical sensitivity, and I'm working on this field since many years. And the point is that this is an offering to the viewer, an offering to the public, that as an offering, it's an invitation. It's an invitation to your thoughts. It's an invitation to deeper levels than just judging what was the past. We don't know what is the past. We know that there are historians who write history, but our history, her history, his history is different. So this is, I would say, an attempt to invite you to this great journey to the past, and we understand the hidden past with the help of these films. These are not clues.
What do you mean by hidden past?
Hidden past because we don't talk about people who have been massacred in the 40s, late 40s, after the war. There are a lot of things that are hidden because it's hard to come out with it. People who lived there lost their paradise. The Japanese occupied it and trained a nationalist army, and the colonial system was not good, not perfect, but we know that it was a multi-layered history where the ethical policy came in the times when the Belgian Congo became even more brutal. So there are differences in the colonial histories. There are differences from region to region, and it's the big questions are hidden. We don't know.
But how did you select the films? Because you say, yeah, there must be. I don't want the official version of history. I'm looking at these home videos because they, you once said, they lived history. Real people lived this history.
Yes.
So that would be a different version of history as the history made by historians in books.
Yes.
But how you have seen hundreds of films in the Eye Museum.
Yes.
So how did you choose the images? Well, it's a long series of images that you in the end came up with. But how did you select them? What was the criteria to?
Well, we worked together with Evelyn and Cesar when we had the pool of films. The Eye Film Museum started to transfer them in the period, just right in the period when their archive saving budget was closed down. So it was very complicated. But we had Evelyn's scientific, anthropological, cultural, historical research and her knowledge of the families of letters. Even she brought in a family with films and letters and memories. So we tried to work out a plan where different characteristics, a poorer family, a wealthy family, a mixed family. We wanted to put in Valraven's critical, radical thoughts also, and we wanted to put in the Holland's radio reporter, which is here the first screen on the left hand. So different attitude. We had this beautiful, great collection of the Kui family, the Chinese Pernakan family, who have been very well first in the opium business, but when the Dutch state confiscated or took it over, then they went to sugar business, etc., etc. So we try to have these different, like a palette, which with these limitations, because of course there are hundreds and thousands of letters in Leiden, and there are hundreds and hundreds of meters of films from the beginning of the 20th century. So our work was a kind of multi-layered patchwork selection to have the pool, and then step by step narrowing it down to the best stories. The best stories, which means films are good, stories are good, the letters are good, the characters are good. Good meaning here that we're able to select a few stories of the hundreds and thousands of stories to tell you something where your imagination starts to work. So this is not the full panorama, because there are scientists who are working on this since decades, and anthropologists and historians. But this is an invitation for the emotional, sensual, private history and the big public history. So when I say, yeah, please?
I just wanted to explain to the public
go ahead.
how when you sit in front of a screen, then you see the images and the films, but at the same time you hear actors reading from letters, and what you also hear is the soundscape, so sound effects, I would call them, or a sort of music which influences your the way you look at the images. Maybe this is a good time. So you have these different layers: film, sound, and text. My experience is, if you sit in front of a screen and you look at the images, then you get sort of immersed in the world of the images. But at the same time, and the music reinforces this world of images. But at the same time, if you read the text and you hear the people reading from the letters, they try to do, well, at least that was my experience, something else, as if to persuade you to understand something, which is different from seeing these images and hearing the music.
Yes. Well, you know, there is a very different way to look at things. If we go to a museum, we usually contemplate. It's a different attitude than we look at television or we browse on the internet between images. Contemplation means that you try to go behind it and not only understand it, which is the logos, but with your seventh senses. We humans are capable to understand the other person in a fraction of 1 second. If we wouldn't be able to do that, we wouldn't live. Mm-hmm. I have to decide if I meet another person in the savannah who steps out from behind a rock or a bush, mm-hmm. whether he or she would kill me or share with me that little lamb that we have. So we are walking in these alleys here in Tong Tong, and there are many people coming and going. We look at each other in a fraction of a second and we know friend or enemy. But we know much more if we are in close circle, in our family or friends. We read so many things without words or with words and with gestures. So films record and keep these things for many, many years, decades, and hundreds of years. These films now saved, and we understand. This is how we understand the Greek culture, from their statues also, but from the Egyptians, etc., etc. So we are reading in others, and we are understanding them. So visual understanding is something very, very strong. And here in this exhibition, you have the split screen, mm-hmm. and your brain, your mind is able to follow the stories in many levels. We do understand these things. And that's the secret. So that's why I say it's an offering. Because we decode the other's culture. Immediately we see that person is coming from a different race. Immediately we see that person is healthy or not. Of course, myself as a man, I look more carefully to beautiful women because that is coded. That is coded in my genes, because that is how women select. Of course, I had 2 marriages up till now. But the woman decided they wanted the kid. I mean, okay, of course, I like you, kid. Yes, it was a moment, a second in their life. In my wife's, I'm monogamous, so it's not harem. So my wife's, they said it's a second for a decision. How a person can decide these things. And these are on the film, behind the jokes, behind the behavior. So what I'm saying is private history is much more rich than public history. There is not such as history, but there are his stories and her stories. And here, for me, the greatest thing, and of course, I think that this was a gift of life, as I'm a guest of life, that I could understand a very, very different culture that starts from Holland, Protestantism, colonialism, trade past, a little army, the social structure, the rules of the game on the colony, the government, the governor, all these systems in the letter, how they, and of course they meet all these inhabitants of different little islands, etc., etc., etc. It's so complex that this is why I say it's a gift of life to travel in depth, travel behind the surface.
But if we go back to the films, let me say you helped history a little because you intervened in the films. You cut them, you pasted them,
yes.
you splitted them, you tinted them, as if to put emphasis on certain
yes.
Images and leave out other images.
Yes.
So what was your purpose with that? You could just leave the films as they were.
No.
Why not?
Because then it's not interesting. Mm-hmm. Because these films exist without me also in the raw material. And you see, there is this beautiful film made by Monnikendam, Moeder Douw. Monnikendam, Vincent Monnikendam.
Oh, yeah, natuurlijk. Yeah.
Vincent Monnikendam has a different attitude towards, it's a brilliant film, it's an inspiring film, but he has a different attitude towards the source material. So my intervention is different because I think differently. My interventions are slow motion, double picture here, tinting. So all those effects that are part of my visual language or artistry or attitude that have to find a language. So it's a complex as a language, and it's also simple, as you said, the soundtrack, the text over. So all these interventions are part of a dramaturgy that every second that I feel responsible for every frame, which is 25 frames in 1 second, every tone, every tinting, every rhythm, how this thing comes in, how the ship comes in, how Rianne waves and how she talks about that tea plantation over, so this is something that I throw myself in and weave it. It's a patchwork. I have a good editor, a fantastic composer, so this is something that formed like clay, formed like a painting, and it's time-based art, so it has the power of inviting you to a journey to the past, and all of us have a different view of this. So I believe that this language that I use in this installation and in my films is a kind of testing the viewer, but the real thing is born in the viewer's mind. The art is not what I present on the wall. The art is born in the viewer's mind. So when you say immersive, oh, thanks for God, she saw it. This is what I'm working on. This is why the whole effort that we did. César Messemaker advised in, I think, 1995 that we should look in the film museum, Netherlands Film Museum archive. We started to look those films. But the home movies were not there. We tried to make scripts for television, but it was the time of Moeder Douw. Moeder Douw took the place and the pace, well done film, of course. For a while, we couldn't run for it. And it was not good for the televisions or the television VPRO, which was open to our challenges. And then César met Evelyn, because they are friends, and through Evelyn's book, César had this idea that this is where we can go deeper than the surface, because these films repeated again and again, these beautiful archive films, made by professional films. And these are used all the time. So to give something to the viewer that is contemplation and not just this is a document and this is the title, that is meaningless for me. Just imagine one photograph. You have...
What was the purpose with you saw all these meters of films, and mostly they were films made by white people.
Mixed.
What was mixed about the films?
No.
There were Chinese people making films.
Chinese, yeah. Indos were making films. Like you see The Echo, which is a beautiful film. It's in a triptych. It's on the left side. I listen to the inner voice, what I have. I listen to the very quiet, low-key inner voice, what is moving for me. And I try to open up with this long, long work those little things that build up the big thing. So these are crossroads where how to find the family. The Tan family came in quite late because Evelyn thought, rightly, how beautiful is that story, a Dutch woman and a Chinese, and his thoughts are just brilliant. He is really a kind of person that if he would live today, we would say, yeah, he's our contemporary, you know. And these are the big challenges. Not only good film, not only good story, but there is something, the fifth sense, you know, or the seventh, I don't know. But it's hard to tell. I'm sitting in the editing room, reading these letters, consulting with my collaborators, and somehow, step by step, they shape something that is more than the source material, more than document, more than a letter. Somehow we find the music of the film.
But did you know something more about history of the Indies? Did you know about the different racial groups and the way?
Of course. I had to read the basic books. Happily, some were translated, high quality books. Also, that was the homework. Without homework, you're nothing. And of course, it's always a risk because I don't speak Dutch. Therefore, there is a risk that we are taking. But, you know, people who never lived in the times of Julius Caesar, they can write very correct books about Julius Caesar. So this is a history that is in another language, different languages, different layers, different characters, and of course, the gender role in the Dutch East Indies, the rules of the game, the farmers, the economy, the social structure, the civil servants, all these very important factors are behind this homework. Without this homework, I wouldn't be able to say one word correctly. And that's why it takes a long time, because it's not enough to take an old amateur film. It's not enough to read a book. You have to really go beyond. And that's the procedure. That's the procedure.
What do you mean by go beyond?
Beyond the facts, beyond the picture, go beyond the letters, go beyond and weave it together like a patchwork.
But how do you do that? Going beyond the letters, going beyond the films?
Well, you know, we have a bunch of letters, families who wrote this, and we have the films, and we have the historic structure. We have the history of the Dutch commerce and the Dutch East Indies Company, etc., etc. And these things somehow, and this is what I do in the last, I don't know, 25 years. That this is my hobby horse. I'm lucky to do things and which I like, and even I get some money for it.
You just saw Indonesians on the margins as a tukang beca or a gado-gado. But I can understand that, because I think film at that time, especially home movies, was really for people that had money to have the cameras. Mm-hmm. And of course the pribumi, the Indonesians, wouldn't have that money, so they didn't make any home movies.
That's a big problem for me.
So my question is this: when you chose your footage for the films and for the exposition, did you especially, probably not, I hope not, did you cut out the pieces that had the Indonesians in it, or were there no pieces?
I think your question is very painful to me.
Yes,
but
I know,
I'm happy
sorry
to answer you. I am in favor of all races. No, wait. I'm trying to answer you. I mean, give me the little freedom to answer you. If you show me another film stock that is you're missing this theme, if you show me, I promise that I will make another exhibition. Okay? No, but this is very important. This is very important. I'm a foreigner. I'm an alien. You know, I'm from the Mars. I have a big collection of respectable footage, letters, etc., etc., etc. I cannot create it. If President Sukarno would have home movies and he would have filmed from Hilversum to Amsterdam on the train, and if he would filmed his family back in Dutch East Indies, if he would have filmed his friends, clear, not mixed population, I would be the most happy to include it.
But that's my question. You didn't find it.
This is the answer. You have the answer. You have the answer. We made an in-depth thing. And also, it's very hard. This is not a politically correct film. I hate political correctness because it's political film. In filmmaking, I hate it because in my own life and in political life, it's correct. But in art, it's very difficult. But what I tried to do here, and you are a witness also because you saw it at I, that from the given material, this is what I could create. And I'm happy to give this fair, the place, to everybody else. This is it. And seeing Vincent Monnikendam's film, I thought, this is a little bit one-sided. And I was happy. I was very happy because I knew that there is something else that I can show. And there is still a lot of things that I couldn't show. And I wouldn't take away the oxygen, the terrain, the place from anybody who would like to show that.
Okay.
I would be very happy. I would be very happy to have home movies from the Sukarno family and all those big bosses, and Suharto, you know, when he's giving the order, please kill those Chinese.
Maybe if you would ask them.
I'm sorry.
But I think it's time because we have to finish. Okay, thank you very much. There's a lot of more to talk about. This exposition.
Sorry. I know that there's time. Is there anybody else's question? Because please, I mean, just give one
question.
One question, please.
How did you come out in and using these colonial films of the Netherlands, US and Hungarian?
So I'm a curious little boy who loves butterfly and collects different kind of colors, you know. That's it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Now you can take off my sound.